The final edition of the Pump Fake before the NFL draft is here. Jared Bailey from USA Today with you, as always, joined by one of the very best in the business today. You can find his work at golongtd.com. Tyler Dunn, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Jared, it is great to be here. Thanks for having me as we're just kind of BSing before, man. It's always good to go from X, Twitter, what's not real life, bring it to real life in Indy at the Combine, which is just, a full week of nonstop. I think we all go hoarse by the end of the week.
Yeah,
I don't know if that has to do with the Kilroys or the conversation.
Yeah, it's the annual tweet up in Indy where we all meet up and then hit several bars at night, wake up, a few hours later and do it all again. It's a good time. I was talking to Mike Tenier last week about this, and I want to get your thoughts on it. This time of year, I've become so cynical about if I never hear the word mock draft again, I think my life will be better because of it. What are your thoughts on this? Not necessarily draft season as a whole, because at the beginning it's very fun. We got Mobile and the Senior Bowl and everything like that. We got the Combine, which is good. But March, mid-March to mid-April, man, this I don't like it.
Oh, I hate it. I'm gonna sound like a curmudgeon, an old man. Maybe it's working with McGinn, right? It's his 40th annual draft series at the site. He's rubbing off on me. He's been a mentor for so long, but man, do I loathe mock drafts. I know they're fun, maybe informative to a point. It's a grift. Honestly, I think it's a total grift. It reminds me of that Simpsons episode way back in the day when Homer and Bart are just, grifting on people in public, just fooling people into giving them money for some awful things. I don't know, man. I read them. Okay, I'll look at them once in a while. I want to see maybe who could go where, but so much of it is just invented garbage. And yeah, the sooner it's out of our lives, the better, because it's everywhere, right? I promise I never want to do a mock draft. I went on Connor Orr's podcast last week. Monday Morning Quarterback. Sorry to plug another podcast on your amazing podcast, Jarrett.
No, hey, but it's totally okay. My buddy Matt Verderam also does that podcast once a week, so I'm not complaining at all. It's a great show.
But I got to give Connor some hell, man. He force fed me. I felt like I was on a hunger strike, and he was holding my mouth open, and he was putting just pig food in my mouth. You must do a mock draft, but it was a fun mock. It was like if we were the GM, what we would do. So, yeah, to answer your question, I can't wait for this all to be over and to actually have players drafted by real football teams.
Amen. We could talk about real football teams real quick. You put out a tremendous piece in the middle of the season last year, discussing the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott and everything of that nature. And then obviously over the past few weeks, big trade goes down. Buffalo sent Stephon Diggs to Houston in return for a 2025 second round pick. They also sent a couple, I think, day 3 picks over along with Diggs. And you highlighted some things in terms of Diggs' relationship with the Bills, McDermott, and things of that nature. And a lot of things have been reported since the trade. What are your thoughts overall on everything? What this means for Buffalo going forward? What it means for Stephon Diggs going forward now in Houston? Just your overall takeaways.
Yeah, it was time, and it got to this point for a reason where it was just irreparable. They couldn't work together. Everything I was told is what I reported back in the series you referenced in December, that Stephon Diggs had enough of the head coach, Sean McDermott. They did not see eye to eye, and I think there's a lot that goes into that. That's not saying one person is right and one person is wrong necessarily. I do think that maybe this offseason, when you had the changes to the roster that they had, right? A lot of veterans leaving. Mitch Morse, right. Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, Gabe Davis, Tyrell Dodson. They've lost a lot. Leonard Floyd was just there a year, but they're clearly going to be a younger team. So I'm sure Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane are looking at this as, okay, we need younger players to emerge as leaders, as, core voices that people rally around and set a good example. I'm sure they're not thrilled with the example Stephon Diggs is setting in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure there's some of that Josh Allen relationship stuff sprinkled in there. Clearly that went sideways a little bit, but players have told me that it was McDermott related in terms of why Stephon Diggs wanted out. And I'm sure the Bills got to a point where they're like, okay, Steph, like we won a lot of games without you. This is a different offense. We don't necessarily need, one go-to receiver that needs the ball 12, 13 times a game. We're going to spread it out. Dalton Kincaid, James Cook. They've got to draft a couple of receivers. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
So I have a hard time having like a really strong opinion and saying like, the Bills are dead ass wrong here, or Stephon Diggs is a pain in the ass. Like the truth somewhere in the middle. I'll say this though, Jared. I do feel like these relationships get to this point when often they don't need to get to this point. When you traded for Stephon Diggs, you probably knew what you were getting into, right? Like he wanted out of Minnesota. A lot of that had to do with Mike Zimmer, the offense, kind of becoming this power rushing attack, which is kind of what the Bills did to an extent last year. But you do know, like these number one receivers, they do come with baggage when they're arriving at the airport, and you better have a plan in place. I just talked to Herm Edwards about this for a series at the site, on how the Bills can kind of smash their Super Bowl window wide open. And Herm made a great point. He said he learned this from Tony Dungy, where you kind of have to identify 3-4 players on your team that as the head coach, you've got to develop a different kind of relationship with. You've got to go out of your way to really get to know that player, and it does take a little bit of maintenance. And look, the wide receiver position is full of those kinds of players. Yeah. I mean, look at this class coming in. You're going to have red flags on just about anybody that you can probably draft if you're Buffalo. So you've got to work with a player to a point. Maybe it reached a point of no return, right? Maybe there's something we don't know, and I'm open to that. Maybe it was worse than anybody could imagine behind the scenes, and the Bills had to move on. But man, he's still a talent. I don't think he's washed up. I think it was just a different offense the second half of the year. The first half of the year, he was having a career year. Yeah, I don't think Diggs is done. I think he'll go to Houston and be good. But they're in this point for a reason. They've got to draft a couple receivers, and that receiver's probably going to have something to him that you have to work with if you're Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Diggs' production in the first 6 weeks compared to the rest of the stretch. I mean, he had 5 100-yard games in the first 6 weeks. And then after that, things, I don't want to say he, quote unquote, fell off, because I think that's a little bit disrespectful. But, I mean, you look at the numbers. I mean, the game against Kansas City, I think it was 4 catches for 24 yards. There was a lot of games like that where, and a lot of that, like you said, had to do with the change in the offense and whatnot. James Cook became more of a vital part of the offense. He was 4th in the league in scrimmage yards very quietly last year. So the Bills, once Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator, I think you pointed out, the run game became more of a focal point. And I'm intrigued to see what that's going to look like with the full year of Joe Brady. I also, when it comes to Buffalo, I have a hard time counting them out as long as they have 17 under center. Like that, he's a pretty big get out of jail free card. I made this analogy last week. Having an elite quarterback is like having a bidet. It cleans up a lot of shit. And I think that Josh Allen is one of the ultimate bidets in the NFL to have if you're an NFL team.
Are bidets in, by the way?
Oh, dude. If I ever get, money, the first thing I'm doing is installing a bidet. I think that you got to, man. Oh, I used one and I was like, wow, I have to go back to living like a caveman once I go home. This is horrible. It's very much, it's a must have if I ever have the wealth to get one.
With Josh Allen, I feel like everybody runs into this when they're writing a story about him. You're trying to think of like a characterization, like a Marvel character, some way to describe what we see. I think you just came up with the perfect descriptor. He's the human bidet. Yeah, right? Maybe that's what it is. He's covering up, and it's. You're absolutely right. He's unbelievable, and that was the impetus for writing the series that I did in December. It's like you've got a window clearly with this kind of talent. You've got to maximize it. And I think they're trying to maybe do a little mini reset with the roster this offseason to keep it open. But the best way to keep it open is 6 days from today, draft receivers. I mean, you've got to try. They haven't been trying. I think they've drafted one wide receiver in the first 4 rounds since taking Josh Allen, Gabe Davis, and I know the Diggs trade is in there. They've signed some guys, but hell, look what the Packers did since they drafted Jordan Love. They've been drafting wideouts and tight ends nonstop, and they didn't have a number 1 last year, which is kind of the world the Bills want to live in now. I mean, Brandon Beane basically said we don't need a true number one. You can only get to that point if you try.
Yeah.
So I don't care what they say at the podium. They're going to be drafting receivers, at least two, maybe three.
Is there a chance that we see that big blockbuster Brandon Ayuk to Buffalo trade pop up on our Twitter feeds?
I don't know, Jarrett, because I mean, if you're doing that you're doing it with the assumption you're going to pay him a lot of money.
Sure.
And they've spent this offseason in cap hell. I mean, they were in the red worse than any team at the start of the league year.
They got that ginormous gift of Von Miller basically voluntarily taking less money, which nobody saw coming. But even then, yeah, they're still trying to work the way out.
Yeah, they needed that. And give Bean and the Bills credit for somehow getting to a point where they could even sign like a Curtis Samuel. But I don't think they're going to get to a point where they're able to pay Brandon. I mean, it'd be great in theory, on paper. He's everything you could want and need, but I think they're going to go with that cost-controlled rookie contract, which is a beautiful thing, at a position where these guys are ready to play. I'm sure you've been writing about this. I mean, these college receivers, they are ready to step in and produce immediately, and this class has a bunch.
It might be the most pro-ready position outside of maybe offensive line, because we see a lot of those guys step in and become stars right away too. But I think wide receiver, the transition is becoming less and less as big a factor as it used to be. So yeah, we're going to see, if Brian Thomas is there, maybe they trade up in the draft, if he's sitting there at 20 and they want to trade with a team like Pittsburgh, move up 8 spots to get a guy that they like. I think that could be very much, and maybe they make a giant jump up to like number 8 with Atlanta and be like, we want Rome Odunze. God damn it. What do we have to give you to get him? And I don't think that's completely out of the equation. Do we know that Brandon Beane's been aggressive in the past?
I would do that in a heartbeat if you're the Bills. It's like we said, you have to act with some urgency here. You don't know how long Josh Allen is going to be able to do this. Stiff arming DBs, leaping over linebackers, shrugging off D linemen, just throwing it through brick walls. I mean, and I think the Bills, you'd hope, are at the point where they're not going to try to neuter that and change him and sanitize his game and put him in this bubble. And like they said so many dumb things last offseason about needing to be safe, and then you get to it, you're 500, you're 6-6, you're on your next offensive coordinator, and you kind of realize, well, we do got to run him 12 times. You know, you just got to let him be himself. That's the reality you live in, but you also know that is going to have a shelf life. But, you got to go balls out. I'm sorry. You can try to change him to somehow meticulously preserve his, but you're not going to get the real Josh. You're going to get some other version of Josh Allen that isn't going to do anything. And
it's going to be the new Coke version of Josh Allen. It's not going to be nearly as good.
Exactly. It's going to be something else. But I got the sense that they realized that. So that being said, why wouldn't you trade a future first? I don't know, whatever it takes to get into range for Rome Odunze if he's available in a trade up, because man, you hear what the scouts say about those top 3 receivers. These are all players that could go 1 or 2 overall in most years. So I think that would be the ideal aggressive move for the Bills. And everybody likes to freak out over picks, but I think Les Snead, in a way, hopefully he broke people's brains in a good way.
People overrate
how that all
draft
works.
Picks way too much, man. Way too much. I've talked about this before on plenty of shows, like where people treat it, the same way as like the Family Got mystery box and a boat thing. Like, there's no guarantee that the things that like a draft pick is going to pan out great. Like, it's great in theory, but like if you can get a proven blue chip guy, get the proven blue chip guy. And if that means you got to give up a few picks to do it, okay. Who are you going to take in the 4th round that's going to equate to what Rome Odunze is going to give you? Probably nobody. So I'm very much on board with the Les Snead mentality of fuck those picks. I'm gonna get the guys that I want. So completely on board with that. We can shift gears to outside of Buffalo. AFC stacked, very stacked. That's not news to anybody. But you look around the rest of the conference as to what other teams are doing. Tennessee seems to be really embracing this whole let's build around Will Levis, then go balls to the wall and give him every chance to prove us right. And if he doesn't, oh well, at least we tried. Jacksonville has Trevor Lawrence. They started off hot last year. obviously his injuries impeded any sort of progress that they had. Looking around the conference, 7 playoff teams last year. Every year since 1990, there's been at least 4 new playoff teams. If you had to pick 2 that weren't going to make the playoffs this year and replace with 2 new teams, which teams would you kick out? Which teams would you bring in? As of right now, obviously, we're sitting here April 19th, 2024, still a long off season, but just for fun ahead of the draft, what are we looking at in terms of your AFC hierarchy?
I like it. And you got me thinking, I'm going to filibuster here because I want to think about it an extra 2 beats, but you got me on Levis and Titans. I mean, that's such a good point. Maybe Levis is good. Maybe he's everything they hope he is. Now, remember, this is Callahan stepping in as head coach.
Offensive-minded head coach now, yeah.
But he didn't draft him, right? So maybe he will want his own guy eventually. And I like the aggressive moves. I think it's better to try to win than delay things and try to have this 5-year. Go for it. You got money to spend it. But also, it kind of brings me back to we were getting at just a couple minutes ago. Yeah, you can trade up and get a receiver, do something aggressive. In their case, paying Calvin Ridley. But it's the chicken or the egg thing. Like maybe that does help your quarterback, but if you don't have the quarterback, man, that's going to blow up in your face. Yeah. You know, Jim Monis, my podcast partner, he was Doug Whaley's right-hand man in Buffalo, and they traded up for Sammy Watkins. They traded a future first. And it's killed to this day. And it's almost like maybe in some Bills fans' mind, like this cautionary tale, like why you should, but no, like look at the 2015 draft. It wasn't a great draft in the first round. Like, it's not like they missed out on anything that bad. The mistake was doubling down on EJ Manuel, tripling down. Like but with that draft pick, you're saying we believe in EJ, and Sammy's a whole different story off the field. He opened up to me in that Bleacher Report story a while back on how he was drinking and partying, and that led to injuries. There's a lot going on there, but the Titans are going to be fascinating because they've made a lot of moves to help their quarterback, but is the quarterback the answer? I can't say definitively one way or the other. They'd be a fun playoff team. I guess 2 teams to put in there. Cincinnati, obvious, right? Joe Burrow back. I think they get in. And I'm going to go Jacksonville.
I think Jacksonville, for me, too, is one of those teams that is getting a lot of hate this offseason. Trevor Lawrence, in specific, is getting like a ton of crap thrown at him. And you look at where they were last year. They're sitting at, 8-3 at one point. At one point, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. And then he gets a laundry list of injuries. I think he had with the calf, the ankle, a shoulder. Like, it was just so much going on with him. He was just getting beat to hell. And eventually just, came crumbling down. AFC South could be very fun because you also have the Colts, who were within a win away of getting in last year with Gardner Minshew as their quarterback. And if Anthony Richardson is anywhere near as good as what people expect him to be, Colts are going to be very fun with Shane Steichen calling the plays. And I think that they could be a fascinating watch as well. AFC South could be just very up in the air. We talk about the AFC North being a dogfight. I think the AFC South is just going to be equally as good.
I think you got to put the Jags in there, though, after watching Trent Baalke's press conference today, right? When
didn't he
rip a fart and keep it moving like he did?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
I think so, too.
So nonchalant. That was incredible.
I hope to have that level of confidence one day. Just be like, you know what? We're just going to let this happen and see where it goes. What do you make of the Jets, by the way? I think, obviously, the biggest question mark, asterisk, whatever you want to say, is okay, how good is future vice presidential candidate Aaron Rodgers going to be?
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers. How much time do we have here on the podcast?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a new conspiracy theory every day with Aaron Rodgers, which is to an extent funny, to an extent just like I'm over it. Like,
well,
I don't know.
No more BS. They don't want distractions. He doesn't want distractions. It's got to be all football, is what he said.
By the way, Anthony Fauci created AIDS. Oh, okay, Aaron, calm down. What are we doing here?
In all seriousness, like, it could go hard one direction or the other. I mean, if Tyron Smith holds up, if Mike Williams stays healthy, if Breece Hall is one of the best backs in the league, if Aaron Rodgers is able to move. I mean, I think we forget what he looked like that last year in Green Bay.
Yeah.
It wasn't great. Like what made Aaron Rodgers special was patting the ball, extending plays, second reaction, thousands upon thousands of baked in reps with Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb,
Mm.
Devontae Adams, just being able to go up to the line of scrimmage, see the same thing as Devontae Adams, not need to do a hand signal and audible, any of that, and you just street ball it. A lot of it out of necessity. I mean, he didn't respect Mike McCarthy. He just kind of did his own thing, and he wasn't going to run his place. Didn't really run Matt LaFleur's offense either. So that's all great when you're still athletic and you can still move, and you've got some veteran receivers who see the same thing as you. So he goes out there with the Jets and he tears his Achilles right away. He's, plays everybody for a fool all season. This ruse of like, oh, he's going to come back from this injury that nobody's come back from that quickly. But we all talked about it. We all gave him headlines and thought it was going to be this miracle. And that didn't happen. And it prevented the Jets from maybe going out and getting a quarterback that's better than Zach Wilson, that is about as productive as my shed with moss all over the roof out my window right now. So, yeah, that was a disastrous season. But guess what? The Jets reap what they sow. Like, you trade for Aaron Rodgers, you're going to be welcoming an absolute disaster in ways that you can't particularly foresee. If it's all, he did win 2 MVPs not too long ago. So I get it. And the Jets have been a dysfunctional franchise. I get it. Like, I get the why not argument if you're the Jets. But he wasn't the same quarterback in Green Bay in 2022 that he was in 2020 and 2021 when he had young players around him. Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams. I mean, do they draft Brock Bowers? Is that all of a sudden going to make the Jets a Super Bowl contender? I don't think so. I mean, the defense is really good, so maybe they don't need much out of their offense. But still, it is really hard to maintain an elite defense year to year to year. It's going to be a lot to ask the defense to play as well this season as they did the last 2 seasons. So I guess I feel like Charlie Kelly in the mailroom. Pepe Sylvia. Like you put all this together, and I just see 7-8 wins for the Jets. Right?
They're the most fascinating team in the AFC for me because I agree it could go one of 2 ways. I don't really see like a mediocre season. I think it could be 12-5, great job, Aaron Rodgers bounced back in a big way, or 6-11, Rodgers is in fighting with X, Y, and Z. I just can't see a way that this goes either like really like mediocre. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on throughout the rest of this offseason and then the rest of the regular season. Let's play a game of this or that. So I'll give you 2 options, whether it be teams, players, etc. Tell me which one you would rather have. So we'll start with quarterbacks. We already talked about him a little bit. Going forward, you can have one quarterback out of these 2. Are you taking Jordan Love or are you taking CJ Stroud?
Jordan Love. You got to go Jordan Love. Been the conductor of that train for a while now, so I can't. I love CJ Stroud. I mean, I think the Texans are a Super Bowl contender this year, but Love, he always had the stuff that you can't into a quarterback: mental toughness, a feel for the game, a feel for the rush, a true leader, a true teammate, and I think Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur knew all along they could coach up the other stuff, the inaccuracy, maybe some areas where he was a little skittish from that last year at Utah State because everybody's hurt, everybody's graduated, he had to run around like crazy, which I think benefited him versus maybe like a Tua at an Alabama when you have 5 stars all around you. It was a different world for Jordan Love. So, yeah, I think that they've got all of these young receivers. They've got one of the best offensive coaches, and Jordan Love is just hitting the start of his prime. I think he and the Packers are going to be good for a long time.
I wrote about Jordan Love for USA Today near the end of the season. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say his top 9 receivers and or tight ends were either rookies or second-year players, which is just unheard of at this level, and still was second in the NFL in touchdown passes after somewhat of a slow start. Like there was a lot of ebbs and flows in the first 7-8 weeks of the year, and then the second half of the year he figured it out. So the fact that he was able to do that, man, you look at the Dallas game too, like he just has such a I don't want to say arrogant confidence, but when I say that, it's a good thing with the way that he throws the ball. It's like, oh yeah, I'm on the left hash. That guy's on the opposite side of the field, 30 yards down the field. I can make that throw. And watch this. Like it's such a flawless confidence that he has. I'll play devil's advocate for Stroud though, because if given like the option, I wouldn't be disappointed with either. Had he not gotten hurt, I think he's the MVP last year in terms of the numbers that he put up. And taking that team, like you look at what Nico Collins was before Stroud got there. I think his career high in receptions was like 37. He had that by like week 6. So turning that ship around in one season with D'Amico Ryans, with Bobby Slowick, both of them are going to be great for a long time. I think we deserve a Jordan Love, CJ Stroud Super Bowl sooner rather than later. It's something I would sign up for immediately, but both of these guys are going to be incredible for a long time.
I totally agree. That would be a great Super Bowl.
Oh,
I love the way you described Love's arm arrogance, whatever term you want to use. He can kind of just backpedal, shrug off the rush, not really be phased by guys in his face, and know he's got the arm to put it anywhere he wants. So yeah, the Packers are in a good place right now, and they're going to be paying Jordan Love a ton of money here very soon.
I said this on a podcast a couple weeks ago. Green Bay Packers, #1 seed in the NFC this year. Something that I could see taking place.
It's going to be a tough division. You know, Detroit's not going anywhere. Minnesota's interesting still. I mean, they had so many injuries last year. And
are you on the Sam Darnold hype train, Tyler Dunn? This could be fun. Yeah.
No, God. I mean, they got to draft a quarterback. No, I'm done. I think we've all kind of taken the Darnold bait at some point, right? Whether it's out of USC, whether it's, he's working with Adam Gase, or whether it's, Carolina, it's going to work out down there.
Carolina Sam Darnold was my taking the bait. As soon as they got him, I was like, that's great. They started 3-0 that year. I'm taking victory laps on Twitter about Sam Darnold, and then obviously it fell apart. But yeah, for like a 3-week stretch, I was the biggest Sam Darnold truther there was, I think.
Had a couple of rushing touchdowns against Dallas early that season, right? Like,
yeah, because they played Dallas week 4 that year. They were down like 20. He gets them to within like 8, and then Dallas pulls away. But I was like, hey, they lost, but look at that moxie. He didn't give up. That's a guy. And then things didn't go well. But yeah, he's still at 26, and he's just got a $10 million. I hope to get paid the way Sam Darnold does. That's a legendary bag getter.
That it's a good lesson for the quarterbacks this year too, Jarrett, where what was the knock on him at USC? Careless with the football.
Yeah.
Like he put it into harm's way, and there's always a couple ways to read that. Is it fearlessness that you like you want your quarterback taking chances? You don't want him being this caretaking, ultra safe quarterback, or is it just a fatal flaw? And it was a fatal flaw. Like he put it in spots of the field where you can't. So Drake May. I mean, there's 2 ways to look at Drake May. He's either fearless and fun and raw and a project you want to take on because he's Herbert, he's Josh Allen, or he's Darnold, or I don't want to say Paxton Lynch. I don't know if anybody really hates Drake May. I guess they'd go that direction. But I like Drake May. I hope he ends up in a good situation. I'd love to see him with Brian Dable in New York, Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. I mean, I guess New England, if they trade for A.J. Brown, could be fun, but that roster is a little tough right now. He is the fascinating player in this draft to me.
All right, we'll move on to the NFC side of things. Cowboys or Eagles in the NFC East right now?
I wish I could throw a Giants curveball at you, but
if you want to make the case for the Giants curveball, I will be all ears. Especially if they're going into year 6 of the Daniel Jones experiment. That would be something. Hit me with it.
I can't do it. I liked them into last season. And I mean, the injuries, the line, you could make a lot of excuses. It was apocalyptic.
Who's their starting running back right now? Is it Devin Singletary?
Devin Singletary, yes.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, man. They don't have anybody on that side of the ball, respectfully speaking, that like defensive coordinators are staring at their ceiling and they're like, how in God's name am I going to stop
Isaiah
them?
McKenzie.
Oh,
how dare.
Davis just bringing in his old Bills guys, eh?
Yes.
Good for him.
I got to answer your question. Philly. Let's go Philly.
I think that's fair, yeah.
It ended terribly last year, but it's, God, Dallas. I just
I
feel
think
like that's
Dallas
such
is
a
going to
maxed
be
out team.
Dallas could be a tire fire this year. Not like 4 wins tire fire, but like 8-9, I think is on the table.
I agree. They've been banging their head against the same wall with three straight seasons. There's something missing, and now Jerry Jones, the way he just mismanages that roster, you have
It's
to
not good.
assume he still has that final call on waiting on the Dak Prescott deal. Now he's waiting on the CD Lamb deal, and they paid Zeke way too much money. The
Yes,
timing
they
of
did.
all these deals, it's just so haywire. I mean, it's been that way for a while. They kind of did the same thing with Des Bryant. I mean, they'll end up overpaying like they always do, and they didn't sign anybody because they can't sign anybody. It's weird. It's weird because they actually draft pretty well, but they're only going to go so far with this head coach, and I guess you can say this quarterback at this point too. When you let Green Bay into your building and they just kill you like that
Yeah,
offensively.
not great. Not great at all. All right. In the AFC North, who finishes with a better record this year? Both playoff teams last year and looking a little bit different. Steelers or Browns?
I think the Bengals win the division.
I agree.
To answer your question, let's go with the Browns.
Okay.
I like your question because we don't really know what to expect out of Russell Wilson and
We
I
do
guess
not.
Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. With Arthur Smith, I I don't think it's going to end well.
Oh,
I
that
feel like Russell Wilson. If,
not,
if
not
you're
an Arthur
paying a
Smith guy.
quarterback, yeah, no, it's not even Art. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of an Arthur Smith thing because we saw in Atlanta not using Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London, all those weapons. But it's more, I can't get past the fact that Denver paid Russell Wilson how much money, or they're taking out how much dead cap?
$39 million
Historic,
dollars this year. I think it's like 80 million over 2 years.
right? You're paying somebody that much money to get the hell out. Like that tells me that he was such a poison in your building. I mean, can you imagine being Sean Payton talking
Sean
about the
Poison.
poison to his ownership? That would be such a hard sell to tell your bosses to pay that much money to tell a player to go away.
Yeah.
And now he's going to be the one that gets the Steelers over the top in this conference, in this division, let alone conference. Burrow, Lamar, I can't see it. And that's, Deshaun Watson clearly has his issues. I mean, he has not been the same player for what feels like forever.
Deshaun
But
Watson hasn't been the
Cleveland's
same player
defense is
since Trump
nasty.
was still in office, man. Like I'm tired of hearing
Yeah.
about Deshaun Watson year after year. Obviously I'm biased towards this. I'm a Steelers fan, and so I guess I can play devil's advocate
That's right.
here a little
Oh,
bit.
man.
Yeah. So the thing with the quarterback situation, it can't get worse. Like I think last year was really like we saw rock bottom, what that looked like. They had a bottom 3 quarterback room. They had arguably the worst offensive coordinator in football, Matt Canada. They're all gone. You bring in an Arthur Smith, who I think as offensive coordinator, you look at what he did in Tennessee. I think that's a fine hire. I don't think it's a great hire. I think it'll be a middle of the pack hire. That's fine. And if Russell Wilson does become some sort of problem, they only have $1.2 million tied up into him. They can cut their losses, and then you've got a perfectly good, hopefully, Justin Fields right there to see if he's your future franchise quarterback. It all depends on what how you feel about Justin Fields.
I'm so out on Fields, too. Oh, man.
give me
a
give me
media
your
darling.
reasons.
I know you're not allowed to say anything bad about Justin Fields.
Sure.
He's just 3 years of this. He couldn't process.
Can I say
You're going to get
one
3-4 fun plays, and
I will say this. During his time there, for the majority of his time, I know he had DJ Moore last year, but there was a lot of Equinemius St. Browns and a lot of Dante Pettises and not great offensive lines, and Luke Getsy is his offensive coordinator. That's another thing. I'm not expecting either Wilson or Fields to all of a sudden become top 10, 12 quarterbacks. But if they're like the 18th, 19th best quarterbacks in the league, that's fine. That's fine. If everything else lives up to his potential, I think that they can replicate what they did last year and win 10 games.
hey, Mike Tomlin ain't gonna lose. He ain't gonna win less than 8. We know that.
Yeah.
And I love the defense. TJ Watt. I've been saying I think he's the best player in football. Maybe he still is. Mika Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward. I mean, you can talk. I mean, they got Patrick Queen, right? So
Yeah.
they're gonna find a way to shorten the game, and they're always gonna dot the I's and cross the T's and block a punt and make a big. The gunner is just gonna like force a fumble. They're gonna do something that's gonna keep them in a game that they got no business being in. And maybe Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields can do enough to win that 20-17 game. I guess I'm thinking like master plan, like in the conference of Burrow, Allen, Lamar, Stroud, Lawrence, Levitt. I'm sorry. But in this conference full of these quarterbacks, like I don't know if that kind of game, that kind of plan is going to work, but we'll see.
And I hear you on that, especially because we've seen it too much over the past few seasons with the Steelers, where their game plan has been, hopefully the team doesn't score more than 20 points and will do just enough at the end to win it. And I think that they recognize that to an extent. Again, I don't think the moves that they made are going to make them a top 10 offense in the league. But if they can get, 21 points a game, maybe 20, like I don't think that's asking too much. I hope it's not.
Yeah.
But we'll see it. And I will say this: Lamar Jackson has only beaten the Steelers once in his career, and it came against Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph in 2019. Just throwing that out there to irritate the Ravens fans.
Tom has got his number. I know Tom isn't worried about Lamar Jackson.
No, a few years ago, I think he did an interview with ESPN ahead of the game. He's like, "Yeah, we're not worried. We're fine." I'm like, "All right, Mike, all right, throw that on the table, bud." Tyler Dunn, this has been an absolute pleasure. What have you got coming on Go Long?
So Bob McGinn's 9-part draft series is rolling right now. It's his 40th. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's talked to scouts and execs all over the league. So you're going to get the good, the bad, the ugly on all these prospects. Check that out just for subscribers. And I'm actually working on a Chicago Bears story as we speak. So Caleb Williams, some field stuff sprinkled in there. We'll take it all the way back to Trubisky. I think this is such a fascinating team at a fascinating time. And yeah, you can get the quarterback, you can get the Caleb Williams, but everything you do around that quarterback, as history tells us, is probably more important. But yes, check that out. I can't thank everybody enough for signing up, for subscribing. We're completely independent, no sponsors, no ads. Great seeing that community get to this point.
One of the very best in the game, and I very much enjoy the content that you and your team provide. It's always tremendous. In terms of me, go read the feature I did on Kalen Carson, Wake Forest cornerback, expected to be drafted around the 3rd or 4th round this year. So go read that. I'll have my feature on Louisville wide receiver Jamari Thrash out in the next couple of days. Those will all be on usatoday.com. What else? Steelers coverage at Behind the Steel Curtain. I already plugged this before. Probably shouldn't have, because it's not completely finalized, but I already did it, so I might as well double down. We'll have Patrick Queen on here in the next few weeks, I would say, once the NFL draft is wrapped up. So that'll be a fun little chat that we'll have with him. Tyler Dunn, always a pleasure, man. Looking forward to doing this with you more as time goes on. And once the NFL season rolls on, I hope that we continue doing this, brother. This is a lot of fun.
Hey, we got to have you on the Go Long podcast too. Let's absolutely keep it going.
That you name me a date and time, and I will cancel all my plans. I will be yours for the taking, my friend. So yeah, you give me a date and time, and I'm yours.
Sounds great, Jared. Thanks a lot, dude.
All right. Appreciate everybody for tuning into the Pump Fake. We'll be back next week to recap the NFL draft. Take care.